Paul McCartney, one of the few people who can actually say they changed the world. There are very few people who are on the earth who could actually say they changed the world. Paul McCartney and the Beatles, they changed the world. There's no question. That's how big their impact was. They changed everything. If you're young enough to have seen them come over, if you understood what they meant to the culture, what happened when Sergeant Pepper's happened, all the different things that we grew up with. And I was right in that era when I was, 10 years old when they came over and the whole thing. So if you're that age, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know how big the Beatles were. Not just how talented they were and how they changed music, but the impact they had everywhere they went. It was incredible. There was nothing like it. We've never seen anything like it. But here's the thing about Paul McCartney, who, as you know, has had an incredible life since he's been in his early 20s, one of the most famous people in the world, one of the most photographed people in the world, incredibly wealthy, as you know. Here's my Paul McCartney story, because I actually have met Paul McCartney. I was going to the Knick game one night, and at the time, he doesn't work at the Garden anymore, but my good friend Barry Watkins, who worked at the Garden, was one of the executives, called me up and said, listen, I want you to sit next to someone at the Garden tonight, because I was going over to see the game. And he said, someone said, just so you can talk basketball, make them feel comfortable, they're going to the game tonight, So I said, okay. Who is it? He goes, no, that's a surprise. I said, okay. So I went to the game. I sat down. I was sitting in like the fourth row courtside. In comes, by himself, Paul McCartney. And I'm like, taken aback. Oh, my God, it's Paul McCartney. So he sits down. Now, interesting, the fourth row. There are a lot of people who go to the Garden and ask for seats. They have celebrity row. There was someone there that night who demanded to be in the first row. I won't say who they are. And would not go to the game unless they had tickets in the front row. They get that that kind of demand. Okay, I'm not going to say who the person was. But that person is in the same universe as Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney demanded not to sit in the first row. He said, please do not put me in that first row. I'd rather sit back. So he asked to sit back. Most of the people demand to sit or asked to sit in the first row. A lot of them demanded. Someone that night demanded, I know as a fact, to sit in the first row. And I'm not going to say who it is. No reason to do that. But he actually asked not to. So I sat with him, and the easiest going, most delightful guy you could have, a great personality, friendly to everybody. I mean, so we sat there. I went in at halftime with him to, as you get up and go inside for the halftime. I went inside for the halftime with him. He asked me to go inside with him, so I went inside. We were standing around, and he comes back and he says, oh, can I have a picture? And I'm like, Paul McCartney, have a picture? Well, it turns out his wife is from Long Island, and she grew up listening to me. Okay, and her son, and she had listened to me with her father, and her. So long story short, she was there now. She met him at halftime, and she comes over, and she was a fan of the program. She had grown up listening to Mike and the Mad Dog, and her son was a big Mike and the Mad Dog fan. And Paul says, hey, get a picture, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, we did that. But she told me some amazing things because I talked to her at halftime. Her father was a big industrial, very successful industrialist. They lived out in the Hamptons, but they listened to Mike and the Mad Dog a lot growing up. And she met Paul, and they got married. And she told me that the way he travels, wherever he goes, he doesn't need a lot of security. He doesn't need a lot of anything. Wherever he goes, people just take care of him. Like they just love him. So he can go anywhere, and he's like, walk down the street and nobody bothers him. He doesn't worry about security. Other people show up with bodyguards and this and that. Doesn't worry about any of that stuff. He's just the most carefree, casual guy in the world. And it's true. He just acts that way. It's remarkable for someone who you would think probably, thinks, has a lot of security and this and a lot of, has to be this way and all these things. And, I could tell you about people who go there as celebrities and have, 5 and 6 and 8 details of bodyguards. He didn't have anybody with him, as an example. It was amazing to meet someone who is that renowned and that successful and just is the most carefree person. And all these years I think about him, and he never stops traveling, he told me. And he just likes to meet people wherever he goes. And this is the life he's led for all these years. So on his 78th birthday, I was thinking about that today. So, I mean, it was a fascinating look at him that you would have never expected, because as anyone who has grown up, knowing that the Beatles were bigger than life, okay? I mean, that's how big he's been since he was 20 years old. So he's lived with this for almost 60 years, this kind of fame that has destroyed people, the kind of fame that, drove Elvis crazy, the kind of fame that people say is so suffocating. He has not only learned to live with it, he's actually enjoyed it. He's actually thrived in it. He is the complete antithesis of what you hear about someone who's that famous, because you hear about how suffocating it is. They can't go here. They can't go there. They can't do this. He does all of it. And I actually can tell you, another time I was in Nantucket, I saw him walking down the street. He was on the other side of the street, so I didn't bother him. But he was just walking along about a summer later. And there he was, just walking along by himself. That's how he exists. And so different than you would think of someone of that magnitude, who has, like I said, is one of the more famous people in the world. He's a Beatle. He is he's Lennon McCartney. He's one of the, he's not just musical royalty, he's royalty. And he is one of the more, renowned people on the planet. And it's amazing how he lives. He lives the way you would want someone to live, but I don't think too many people who get to that position live that way. They seem so guarded and so protected. He seemed the direct opposite of all that, completely. And it was fascinating to see. It really was. So a very happy birthday to him at the age of, amazingly, 78, because you wonder where the time goes. Because I remember as a kid, when we used to have these stupid Beatle wigs when we were like 10 years old in class, like, in Catholic school, the guys would put on these crazy Beatle wigs, and, you wanted to have the Beatle look and the shaggy hair and the whole thing. I mean, that's how big they were when they went on Ed Sullivan and the whole thing. And when Sgt. Pepper happened, it kind of changed everything. Even people who consider themselves athletes wore bell bottoms in those days. I mean, that's just the way the world went. And then your hair got longer and you wore bell bottoms, and that's the way the 60s were. At 67, 68, 69, or, that time of life. So, I mean, they had such an incredible impact on the culture, not just the American culture, the world culture. And he's still around doing what he does at the age of 78. Remarkable life.